All right. Well, here we go with our third week of the WNBA season underway, and have Scott Winslow and Danielle Winslow here to talk a little W Hoops basketball. And mainly as Hoosiers, we're going to mainly be talking about the Indiana Fever, but also want to talk some about other goings on in women's basketball. So, Danielle, the big news, of course, for this week for the Fever is Caitlin Clark being out, but then two more injuries also.
Yeah, it was a rough week. Going into it knowing that you had Caitlin out, but thinking the two teams that you're playing are against kind of the bottom of the league. It's the bottom of the league opponents. So you had Washington and Connecticut, and thinking that those should be winnable games without Caitlin, and then not only losing both games, but having two more players go out injured.
Yeah, so you and I don't remember if we talked about this on the podcast last week or just after that. We had been looking at the upcoming schedule and thought, the 5 games coming up in the 2 weeks that they said she's going to be out at least 2 weeks with her injury. So we thought, they could go 3 or 2, maybe 4-1 even would be realistic. And now 3-2 is probably impossible. They'll be lucky to get to 2-3, it seems like at this point. So now, though, they even have two more injuries. So maybe take a few minutes to talk about those injuries, and let's take a few minutes to talk about the two losses this week. So it's Colson was out, and then Cunningham. Have there been any updates on their injuries or their timelines?
I haven't seen anything about either of them. They don't play again until Tuesday, so I'm guessing we might hear something closer to Tuesday about if they'll be playing or not. Um, and also, it looks like something's going on with Howard because anytime she's on the bench, she has like a wrap on her back or some kind of heating thing, and hasn't played a huge number of minutes in the past few games. But yeah, so they both went out in the last game against Connecticut, and both of them were J.C. Sheldon fouls, or I don't know if they were both called fouls, actually. I think maybe the one on Cunningham wasn't called a foul. But yeah, Connecticut was very physical, J.C. Sheldon in particular. And on a few other plays, she ran through Lexi one time. But yeah, Colson went down, something with her leg. I'm not sure if it was her knee or her ankle, but she went down early. And then they were kind of left without any primary ball handlers and had to do it by committee.
Yeah, and it really the ball handling didn't seem to be a problem in the fourth quarter. After Cunningham went out, but yeah, just for the game as a whole, yeah, I didn't feel like there was that much great offensive flow.
No.
And it's definitely a problem not having a point guard just from that standpoint. And yeah, JC Shelton, what's up with her playing fullback? I know she went to Ohio State and that's a big football school, but
Yeah.
she looks like she weighs about 120 pounds dripping wet.
Yeah.
And she was just like running through screens with her shoulder down. I don't know how the one on Cunningham wasn't a foul.
Yeah.
The WNBA, from a broader perspective, maybe we can talk about this another week. Don't want to go into too much on that this week, but that can be a topic of why are they letting it get so physical? And, plays like that, you got to just call a foul there. I don't want to see football on a basketball court.
Yeah, for sure. It's been very physical, and they have been calling a lot of fouls. I think they were talking about it in one of the games this week that um, the total number of fouls is up, the total number of free throws are up quite a bit over last year. But still, yeah, the play has been way too physical. And if you're a team like Indiana, in theory, you're trying to play with pace and passing the ball and moving a lot. And that gets really hard to do when that level of physicality is allowed.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it impacted them this week with the games with the Mystics and the Sun. I don't remember if I checked the free throw numbers. I know Stephanie White had complained about that. Did you get a chance to look at the free throw numbers in those two games? As far as I know, the thing that I think hurt Indiana with the fouls was actually Aaliyah Boston getting in foul trouble
Yeah.
in both of those games, I believe. And um, so the game against the Sun, she picked up a pretty mysterious foul that looked like a clean block on Rivers in the fourth quarter. Um, shortly after, I'm pretty sure it's shortly after Shelton just ran through Cunningham, or maybe it was shortly after. Oh no, it was shortly. There was a play where Boston scored, but as she was dribbling down the lane, um, Tina Charles had a double armbar on her, and
Oh, yeah.
I was just yelling at the TV screen. I was like, that's a foul by rule. I mean, you
Yeah.
cannot put two hands on a dribbler,
Yeah.
and they don't call a foul. And then Aaliyah blocks Rivers' shot. She's got like 8 inches on Rivers or something. It looked, if there's contact, it was very incidental, and they called
Yeah.
a foul. And it's like, how do you let that play where Tina Charles commits a foul by rule, and then 10 seconds later turn around and call Leah
Yeah.
on a
And
fairly
even
clean block?
some of the other, they called where Leah just had both hands straight up and Nelson Adota got tangled up with her and they call a foul on the Leah and they have to use the challenge on that
Right.
and burn a challenge on nothing. The free throws were pretty even actually in the two games. They shot 27 to Washington's 25 and then 15 Connecticut and 21 for Indiana in the
Okay.
most recent game. So
All right.
that's gone a little better.
Yeah.
And the shooting has improved. They have still missed free throws. And again, these are games that are one possession games that they're losing. So
Right.
those, you really do feel those missed free throws. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, coming out of this week, just had a couple questions I wanted to ask you about. So one is the offense really the problem? And let me set it up here for you for a moment, just to give a little context. I looked very quickly, just at some of the numbers. So with Caitlin Clark in the first four regular season games, they scored 93, 90, 81, and 88. So averaging high 80s. In these two games without Caitlin this week, they scored at 77 and 83. So clearly with the Mystics, it's a little bit down. Um, but with the Sun, they got in the 80s. I mean, that's not too far off their season average. But what I noticed is that for the Mystics and for the Sun, they scored more than their season average against the Fever. So the Mystics this year had scored 90, 90, then 74, 72, 62, 83 against the Fever, then 63 against the Liberty. So they've had like four games under 70 points, or in the low 70s and under 70. And they got 83 against Indiana, which is giving up a lot of points to a team that's not that great on the offensive end. And then the Sun in their games this season, they had scored 85, 62, 70, 55, 87 against Dallas, and then 85 against Indiana. So, you know, their second highest scoring game of the season came against Indiana. So, a question is the problem the offense, or is some of it defense, or is it a mixture of the two?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of the two. The offense has looked bad, even if they're putting points up on the board. Like they're just not getting a lot of movement or passing, which is what over the last year plus you've come to expect from Fever offense with Caitlin Clark is that there's going to be a lot of passing, a lot of running, that it's going to be fast and exciting. And it has not been that, certainly, the last two games. But it is surprising to me. Caitlin's big knock on her game is that she's not much of a defensive player. And so you kind of think with Caitlin out of the lineup, the defense is going to be, the offense will suffer, but the defense will at least be better. But it hasn't felt like that. And against Washington in particular, they gave up a lot of offensive rebounds, just not securing the defensive rebound. And part of that probably is that Aaliyah's been getting in foul trouble in these games
Mm,
and not able to stay on the floor. But She played 29 minutes against Washington and um, 26 against Connecticut. But with Caitlin out, you need her on the floor more than that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you're right. Pr likely with Caitlin, the offense probably would have been over 90 points in each of these games, or at least in the 80s against Washington. But one thing that I just rewatched the Connecticut game a little bit earlier today, and in the third quarter, Mabry went off.
Yeah.
And you would think with having Cunningham and Hull guarding her, you having your two better guards out there,
Yeah.
defensive guards, that would be something that would really maybe they'd be better defensively with Caitlin out, but it didn't seem to be the case. You expect the offense to be down with Caitlin out, but the defense really didn't improve as much as I thought it could, and especially against Mabry in that third quarter. I mean, she just lit them up, and I think the refs were letting her get away with a lot of her typical push-offs, um, and she was very physical on the offensive end. But yeah, I kind of thought maybe they would get a little better, giving more minutes to Lexi, more minutes to Sophie, getting more pressure on the guards. But both teams scored significant points. Both teams got up in the mid 80s on them, and so that was one thing it just surprised me.
Yeah.
That their defense really wasn't much better without Caitlin. So I mean, boy, if the offense is definitely much worse without her.
Yeah.
So you know, you would have hoped they would have gained some there.
Yeah, and it could
Um,
be a bit just that it's early in the season. They've played 6 games, and that's something that will hopefully improve. But you'd think with Natasha Howard, Duana Bonner, these are veteran players who have been in the league a long time, who are good defenders. So you would think that that would have been a little bit quicker to come together, and maybe the offense takes a little time to get all the pieces moving together. But you think that the defense would be there more immediately, but it has not been so far.
yeah, and I think they're going to have to get that together as the season goes on, and maybe hopefully they'll be able to.
Yeah.
So the other question I had for you is about Aaliyah. So is Boston getting enough shots?
Yeah, no, definitely not. I think after the Washington game, I sent a text in the family chat and said, Aaliyah got 5 shots, and 5 players not named Aaliyah got more shots than that on the team.
Right.
And with Caitlin out, maybe you want Kelsey Mitchell taking more shots than Boston, but Boston should be number 1 or number 2. Especially the way she's been playing. She's been so good. And part of it, again, is the foul trouble, but that also comes back to not really having a true point guard.
Yeah.
Colson's been starting and only was able to play the first quarter before getting hurt on Friday, but um, they don't really have anyone who can get Boston the ball as well. And so it's more like she got a couple offensive rebounds and shots that way, even like of the 5. So they just haven't done a good job of getting her the ball. And it seems like that needs to be a big priority for them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, she shot 80% from the field in the two
Yeah,
games without Caitlin,
right.
but she's just not getting shot attempts. I mean, she's had other than the game against Atlanta where that they won, she only had 7 shot attempts. Other than that game, these last 2 games with Caitlin out have been her lowest shot attempts of the season.
Yeah,
And so part of it, I think you're right. They don't have a great passer who can get the ball into a post player. So I think Coach White and her staff need to figure out some plays, some quick hitters, some things to get Aaliyah more involved in the offense. I mean, she's
yeah.
clearly the best offensive threat without Caitlin there.
Yeah, and we also have talked about it seems like she's also pretty clearly the second best passer on the team after Caitlin. They don't really have any other high level passers. And some players can pass, but um, like her basketball IQ and her passing is probably the second best on the team, it feels like.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, she had 8 points in that loss to Connecticut.
8 assists, right?
Eight assists. I'm sorry. Yeah, 8 assists, and she was 8 for 10. Or eight
Yeah.
field goals. She played a great game, but was limited with the foul trouble. I think it was in the second quarter, I want to say. She picked up her second foul early, And I told mom, he's like, "Oh, coach needs to take her out right now. She's, it's
Oh yeah.
earlier in the second
And
quarter.
Dantas is on the sideline.
Giannis is on the sidelines, and then like a minute later, she picks up foul number
Yeah.
three. And I was like,
Yep.
ah, it's just like
Yeah.
so frustrating. It's like you got to be quicker on the draw there. Dantas, you were going to lose that much at that point. Bringing Dantas in for a few
Yeah.
minutes, and her picking up her third foul there, I thought really hurt them,
It did.
um, and maybe potentially cost them the game. You never know. I mean, that game they got the lead at the end of the
Yep.
fourth quarter. They had their shot. They should have won, but again, it was the defense. They gave up a bunch of threes down the stretch of the game too. I think
Right.
Rivers hit one, Bree Hartley hit one, and so again, they got the lead back, but their defense kind of failed them, especially
Yeah.
their 3-point defense.
And another thing from the Connecticut game that stood out to me was the end of game. Like this is several times now where they've had kind of end of game situations where they have the ball and a chance to win in a one possession game and haven't been able to convert again. And to me, at that, they had the reset timeout, so they were able to advance the ball. They
Mm.
pass it into Kelsey Mitchell, and she airballs a tough shot on the baseline. To me, you have to go into Boston there. So that's, yeah, they have not been executing on those end of game situations so far.
Yeah, I mean it's been rough, for sure. Um, So what about anything else around the league before we got a new segment we're going to roll out this week, but any other thoughts just about this past week um, in WNBA basketball before we do our new segment?
Um, well, Paige finally had a good game against Connecticut in their first win, so that was nice to see her back to kind of her normal efficiency and playing like Paige. Yeah,
Yeah. I think Minnesota and New York remaining undefeated
yeah.
clearly seem like the two top teams in the league. I think Las Vegas had a good win. Who'd they beat? They beat somebody, right? I think they had a good win. Was it against Seattle? Did they beat Seattle?
They beat LA for sure. They might have beaten Seattle too. I don't remember.
I don't remember. For some reason, I had that in mind. But maybe Vegas is going to get rolling. It's clearly taken them a little while to get adjusted to having Jewel Lloyd there instead of Kelsey Plum.
Right.
But yeah, I know we talked about some of the rankings. People are already starting to do ranking power rankings of the WNBA teams, and it seems like there's a pretty clear top two, and then a pretty big drop off after Minnesota and New York, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so they Vegas beat Phoenix is who they
Oh, it's
beat.
Phoenix is who they beat. Yeah. So
Um,
that was
and
a good win.
then yeah, they beat LA as well.
Okay. Yeah. So, all right. Well, one thing we had talked about doing was a new segment, try to make it a regularly occurring theme is what were they thinking? And this kind of comes from Brandon Christensen, a friend of ours who is a big NBA fan. He and I have been talking a lot about the NBA playoffs, and there's a bit of a controversy. Oklahoma City lost a game to Denver when they were up three, and they were fouling to force Denver to just shoot two free throws, and ended up losing the game with that strategy. And at one point, the last under 10 seconds ago, I think, um, Oklahoma City had just scored or made one out, two free throws. I don't remember exactly what it was, but Denver had no timeouts yet left. Jokic was on the bench, and just make them scramble. They were gonna somebody else on the team was gonna have to make a play, but instead they committed a foul. It let Denver get Jokic back in the game without a timeout, and they made both free throws and ended up winning the game with Jokic back on the court. And it's just like, what were they thinking,
Right.
in doing that? So we want to take that as a kind of do a regular segment of just kind of looking at some of the decisions that teams are making in the WNBA and maybe sometimes more broadly about women's basketball. But so for our first, what were they thinking? So it doesn't have to be limited to just this week. It could be more broad than just this week. What do you have for What in the world was this team thinking?
Yeah. I think I'm going to go with the Indiana Fever. And in the off season, what were they thinking? Not getting a serious backup point guard.
Yeah,
Um, I get that Colson has championship experience, but championship experience riding the bench, and not really playing meaningful minutes, except in one playoff game, against New York, in 23. That was pretty impactful. But there are not a million great point guards out there. The bigs are much deeper in the WNBA,
yes,
but there are better guards than Colson that you could have gotten to back Caitlin up. And it seems like they didn't really have a plan B. And right now you have Clark and Colson out and no
yeah,
guard at all. They cut Grace Berger in the off season, which we're biased as Hoosier fans. We
right.
obviously wanted them to keep Grace, and love her game, but I, I don't know how you can say that Colson is really better than Grace. And Grace is like a clutch shooter. Like give her the ball and give her a screen or let her take someone off the dribble and she can make a bucket. Um, so that, or even if you're gonna pick Timpson at number 19, why do you need Brianna Turner?
Right.
And then they cut a guard. At the end, it was down to kind of Timpson and Jalen Brown, and they cut Brown, which I like Timpson a lot. I think she was a good pick and a good person to have on the team to build for the future. But then I don't see the need for Turner, especially because they're not playing her. So yeah, what were they thinking with kind of a big hole in the roster there?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good one. That's one we've been asking actually for quite a while here. We're just wondering why they didn't do a better job of getting it back up for Caitlin. I mean,
Yeah,
she's been, you know, available since her sophomore year in high school, hasn't
yeah,
had an injury, so maybe they're just counting on that and not feeling like they need a lot, or I don't know. But yeah, seems like a big mistake, and it's going to cost them. I mean, they're losing games now
yeah,
that they shouldn't be losing. Um, so I think for me, the one that I'm going to go with is with the Dallas Wings. What were they thinking in playing Paige so many minutes? And they
yeah,
said they were going to be managing her minutes. They were going to be smart about it this season. And if I'm remembering correctly, she's leading the team in minutes played,
yeah,
and then she gets hurt. And I know it's a concussion protocol, and who knows, it may have happened anyway. But I mean, what were they thinking with having Paige lead the team in minutes played? And it just makes
yeah,
no sense to me. They need to be losing anyway, and it's just a good excuse, a good way to tank is to not play Paige 35 minutes a game, and instead they go back, it seems like, on what they stated at the beginning of the season and, you know, are playing her way more minutes than they should. And maybe this goes back to a longer ago, what were they thinking question and hiring a rookie coach who has no experience in head coaching at
right.
all, I believe.
Yeah,
I'm assuming it's because he has connections with Kurt Miller
yeah,
and the LA Sparks franchise. But yeah, that to me was really disappointing to see. They need to be tanking. We're living in the Dallas Fort Worth area, so we've been following the Wings a lot because of that. And you could have a lot of what were they thinking about this franchise over the past few
yeah,
years since we've been following them.
yeah.
That yeah, they've got themselves a great player for the future of the franchise, and yeah, what are they thinking?
Yeah, and a lot of their losses haven't even been close games, so it's not like it's a 1 point game and you're like, oh, maybe we can get this one. They've
Yeah,
lost pretty handily to quite a few teams. 15 points here, 20 plus points. Um, so a few of their games have been close, but still, a loss is a loss. You weren't going to beat Minnesota. You didn't need to play Page a bunch of minutes in that game.
no, yeah, yeah. So all right. Well, hopefully Paige and Caitlin will both be back sooner than later.
Yeah, and
You
Colson and Cunningham and everyone else.
yes, everyone else who's been hurt with all the
Like you
physical
said,
play.
Thomas, there's a lot of people out right now,
There are a
actually.
lot. Yeah, but for
Papa.
us, with Caitlin and Paige have been some of the players we've been following most closely for the past 5 years.
Yeah.
And hope they get back to full health quickly. Basketball, women's basketball is better when those two are playing. Um, and then I think the other thing to talk about, I guess, is the Commissioner's Cup is starting today, I believe. The first games of the
Yeah.
Commissioner's Cup.
Yeah, so the next like 2.5 weeks, and they've organized it a lot better this year. In the past, it was kind of confusing. It was like the first home game against each of your conference, and like their home and your home counted towards the rankings. This year, it's just the next 2.5 weeks, all the games count. So for the Eastern Conference, they're playing 5 games. For the Western, they're playing 6 because they have one more team now with the Valkyries. And then whoever has the best record from each conference faces off. I think it's July 1st. And I expect that'll be New York and Minnesota, but we'll see.
Yeah, it'd be surprising if it isn't those two
Yeah,
teams.
a
And
repeat of last year.
a repeat of last year, maybe a preview of this year's championship. I mean, it seems like they're the two best teams, and now that McBride's back,
Yeah,
I think Minnesota's been undefeated without McBride in all the games, and
yeah,
then they had Nafisa sit out a game and still won, and
yeah.
so they're a good team. They play well together. They cover up for each other when somebody's out, and when they
Mm-hmm.
have all
And
their pieces together, I think
yeah,
they're the second best team in the league. I
yeah.
think New
And
York is better.
Minnesota's underrated defensively, I feel like. They're not flashy. They're not necessarily getting, huge blocks into the stands, but they're just a really solid defensive team.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that Nafisa, it's still shocking to me after watching her play at UConn, where I didn't think she was a great defensive player, but very offensive minded, great on the offensive end, um, but solid defensively, not a liability. But I didn't think, she wasn't an Aja Wilson on the defensive end. But yeah, she's just a solid defensive player. She's long, she can rebound, she can
Yeah.
defend almost any position. And
Yeah, she
so,
had 5 steals against Seattle in a win the other day. So in a
yeah.
quarter,
Oh,
in
wow.
first quarter she had 5 steals. So, and then remember last year in the finals they talked about how many jump balls she had forced, and she just does
Right.
a lot of little things that impact the game.
Yes, she does. Yeah. Yeah. Well, she's one of our favorite players, and
Yeah,
so that'll be, yeah, will be fun. If it's Minnesota and New York, that should be a great game,
yeah,
and look forward to seeing that. All right. Well, I think that's all we have. The Fever have two games coming up this week. Um, so they've got Washington and got Chicago Sky again, but Chicago games without Caitlin aren't going to be quite as big media hype as previously, but
which is not a bad thing for
no, right.
that
That's a good thing.
rivalry that's trying to be forced down our throats.
Right. Right. So, yeah, I mean, I think both those games will be tough for
Yeah.
them to win. I mean, just based on what we saw this week and now losing Colson and Cunningham. And
Yeah, if Colson and Cunningham are still out, they'll be eligible to get a hardship player, like a 7-day contract. But I do think that eats into their salary cap, and I think the plan is for them to sign a 12th player midpoint through the year, so that might push that back. So that would be a consideration.
okay. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for the time, Danielle, and look forward to talking again next week. And hopefully, we'll have a little better results from the Fever.